first of all, we wanted it to be amazing and the best thing we'd ever done and anybody had ever heard. And then, second of all, we wanted to use lots of keyboards on it, more so. And so the two combined, and we reached a certain point. But what that meant was basically we just pushed ourselves really hard in kind of every direction with each song, taking it as far as we could.
To be honest, I think that's all there is. It's all about personal challenge, and our challenge wasn't to sell more records than the last one. Our challenge was to try and feel more confident and satisfied with how we'd all worked in the studio than we'd ever done before. That was the only challenge that there was, really.
Basically an exercise in showing off to each other. Doesn't really matter where it goes as long as it's good. I think that's the point, really.
Mm-hmm.
Chris and I started immediately after finishing the tour in the end of the middle of 2003 in Chicago. We did a few weeks there just to basically lay down demos of stuff we'd already written, and but we ended up sort of working from those demos, then coming back to London, meeting up with Guy and Will, and doing more and more, and basically going about it in a kind of weird way, in that we'd never really played the songs together, but we were trying to record them. And we did that for quite some time, really, probably about 10 months. Then we realised that a lot of it sounded like we'd never played it together. Had no atmosphere, no sort of tension in it.
The dynamics, it just sounded flat, because we were working, individually. Chris would come in and lay down his part, and then Will would do his drums, and then go, and then, so on and so on. And it came to a point where we realised we weren't really working as a band anymore, and it could have been just session musicians going in there, and
except crap session musicians.
Crap session musicians. And so what we had to do is really find ourselves again as a band, and remember what it was like to just be in Johnny's bedroom with a few guitars and amps, and just really go back to basics. And then that's when things started to really happen, and when we started re-recording things, we were able to do it in a performance-based way, and to throw ourselves into the the verses and then the choruses in a much more dynamic sort of way.
Then we finished the majority of the album in the last 3 months or so, wasn't it?
We pretty much re-recorded and did the whole album in 3 months. There was a few things that were kept from the previous recordings, the odd guitar track or piano track or something, but it was, the majority of it was done in 3 months in London. We spent that first year with Ken sort of writing and arranging all the songs, but what we didn't have was definitive recordings of them. And so when we realised this sort of going back to basics, if you like, and sort of learning to be a band and learning to perform the songs together, we needed to start the recordings again. And I think, we'd spent a year with Ken, and it just felt that we needed a bit of a fresh start. It was nothing really to do with Ken as a producer or Danton as a producer. We just needed to be in a different place, in a different sort of mindset, just because it was a very daunting prospect having to restart everything and not use a year's work. So it really just felt like a bit of a fresh start for us, which was nice. I think if he comes in and he's plays us a song like that and he's confident, it's obvious that it's good or not, but sometimes he'll show us things and they're not actual songs. They might just be like a little melody or something, and generally when he shows you something which is only about 30 seconds long and it's not being turned into a full song, it's not great. But I mean, we worked. I think we had about 60 ideas in total that we were sort of working from in this record, and it's quite a long process to kind of narrow that down to the 12 that we've picked. I mean, it generally happens is we'll be working on sort of round about 10, and then something better we'll start working on something better, and it just kind of shunts the worst one off that 10, and just sort of into the touchline a little bit, and it sort of works like that.
Well, we thought we were ready straight away, because the only thing that makes us want to come off tour is when we have new songs that we're desperate to record. So we finished in Mexico City in September of 2003, and Johnny and myself went straight to Chicago to start recording. But I don't think we were actually ready. It took us a while to get used to not having that adrenaline rush of playing live every day. But we went in and some of the songs that we had then made it on the record, so it wasn't a waste of time by any means.
I think we actually recorded close to 20. I think 18 or 20 actually fully recorded. But then ideas and kind of bits of songs throughout the 2 years, between 60 and 80 probably.
I heard that if you laid all our discarded songs next to each other, it would go to Birmingham and back. There's a lot of them. But the thing is, let's get this, put the record straight, is that Will discards the songs, and so he's the one to ask about how many he discarded.
Personally, I discarded in the region of 50, I would say. The thing about it's not just like Chris has spent hours and hours writing this huge opus, and I go, no, it's not good enough. It's just sometimes an idea or just a riff, but if you could trace the family tree back of some of our songs, they would all have relatives in these songs that we were doing, like when we were touring, and just little ideas for riffs and beats. It's just like a big kind of strange, what's the word, genealogy of the
It's
songs.
true, right. To get to the finished standing up man version of the song, we've been through all the stages of the evolution process. Well, it's interesting because there was a period about 18 months ago where I just felt like everybody hated what we were doing, and we were having some trouble with newspapers and things like that. And I just thought, God, I wonder if we should maybe stop singing about the way we feel about things, stop singing emotional songs, and maybe start writing about characters or, ironic stuff, things like that, or heavily political, But Johnny and we all talked about it, and they said, no, you shouldn't edit yourself. And so the themes that are on the record are just anything that I or we have been thinking about or experiencing. I'd say the strong themes are love and loss and death and excitement and fascination with things we don't understand and are either terrified by or inspired by. And part of that is maybe to do with having met lots of very powerful people and realise that they're just humans like me and you, in that that you should never be scared by anybody else's position, except police. I'm terrified of the police and people who work at airports. They're the only people you should be intimidated by. But it's a funny realisation when you come to understand that Leonardo da Vinci was just a man and Einstein was just a man. So it just makes you think, well, this culture we have at the moment, everybody is kind of suppressed or told they're not good enough, or that's one of the optimistic themes, is that you can do it.
But we really wanted to push ourselves in, especially because Guy has got so many keyboards now and so many keyboard sounds. We really wanted to kind of use that much more. I mean, we touched upon it on the last album, but not really. We'd only ever used one sound, hadn't we?
I think we felt, we wanted to make a record which was different from the other two, and essentially, the similarities are the fact that the record's based around strong melodic songs, and so the only thing we've really got to play with is how we treat them in the studio. And I think, we could have used a brass band, or we could have used a Jew's harp or something, and we realised that the music we were listening to, getting more into was more based around keyboards and synthesizers and Brian Eno, Kraftwerk and New Order and Depeche Mode, and we sort of found that we could go down that alley and we could treat songs and still have them be sort of sound emotional, and because we didn't use synthesizers to the point that it was that clinical 80s sort of sound, but there was always bands around in the late 70s and 80s who were using them in a very sympathetic way. And you know, Bowie and Eno and all these people we've mentioned are people that we drew influence upon.
Well, X&Y is a three-pronged title, because on the one hand it looks cool and it relates to the mathematical it relates to this mathematical imagery, and we're all fascinated by algebra, and within algebra the way that X and Y are always used to represent figures or quantities that no one actually knows. X might be 12 or it might be 7, or it's like an answer, but that it isn't really an answer at all. So that felt very apt, because there's a lot of questions and answers. Then it was all to do with there being two sides to everything, X and Y, and dark and light and good and bad, because it seems to me that everything relies upon the tension of opposites, and I was wondering why every day was such a mixture of extreme excitement and terrible worry. And then I thought, well, maybe it's because that's how life works. And so X and Y felt very apt on that level, and also it's X and Y like man and woman. So there we go.
Square One for me was is the song that I'm, in terms of my performance, most kind of pleased with, because it came out of a kind of one of the only songs we've ever written
jam.
That came out of a jam. Yeah, we don't used to.
We hate the word jam.
Conjures up noodling and terrible ideas, but
you started that song.
Well, there was a riff. Johnny had a riff, and we had one day. In fact, it's the only day we've ever been left on our own without a producer. And we went into thought, okay, let's work on this new song, Square One. So we went in and set the tapes rolling, and about half an hour later we came back and listened to it, and it was just like, it was a great riff, but it sounded like Dire Straits, which wasn't perhaps we love Dire Straits, but not necessarily the direction we needed.
But we genuinely do love Dire Straits,
Yeah.
and Mark Knopfler produced the best ever Bob Dylan song called Joker Man. So we're not dissing Dire Straits.
No, not at all.
We
Just wasn't right for us at that stage. So, but then we went in back up to a different room and started kind of jamming it and playing it through, and then we used this kind of an old 70s drum machine to create just a solid rhythm. And then Guy started playing around on his computer.
We started sort of producing it on my laptop with some sort of percussive sounds and some keyboards, and we were playing along with it. It was actually sort of came together in a rehearsal room we had above the studio where we were mixing, and sort of we were writing that at the same time as trying to mix some other tracks downstairs. And I think it was the interesting thing about it was we knew as soon as it was sort of come together that it should be the first track on the album. We just felt that it sort of showed, because it's very important, the first track on a record, because it's kind of like it's like your first impression of an album. And we felt that it showed sort of quite progressive things for us, really. It showed quite a lot of ideas, and it was quite high energy as well. So we always knew that it was going to be the opener.
I really like the ending as well, because it reminds me of a Bowie song.
The ending of that song came from listening to Space Oddity,
Yeah.
and I was just sat at home, I don't know, in like one of the 2-minute breaks from recording, and I was like, oh, I'm sure that it needs something else at the end. And then this melody just arrived, like all the best Coldplay songs. I have no idea where it came from or why it was sent to me, but I was very grateful to receive it. And it suddenly made me. I thought we won't play any acoustic guitar on this record, and then in the last 3 weeks of recording, we just put it everywhere, largely because of this bit that arrived for the end of Square One. But we're very proud of that song. I think that each of us is pushing ourselves as hard as possible, and it was a big deal for us to have that song, because we kind of, like we were talking about the evolution of songs, we'd been working towards that song for a long time with sort of lesser versions of it.
That was an older song, and it was one of the songs. The songs really fell into two categories on on the album. They were sort of either the experimental ones which sort of came around in a sort of more bitty way, like things like Square One. But this What If was a sort of more traditional sort of song in the sense that Chris wrote the whole thing on a piano and showed us the whole song, and there was nothing left to do to the music, and it was just a case of just them sort of working on it as a band and writing sympathetic parts for it, and that it was it was really quite a quick process.
This was a song had been written while we were still touring the last album, and well, it just, I mean, we've done about 20 different versions of it, I think. I don't know. It was really hard to record. Easy to arrange, hard to record.
This was What If was one of the songs that was around for a while, and it arrived in a complete form. It wasn't just like an idea. It kind of, Chris brought it to us as an entire song, and it was very kind of classic sounding in that form, and we just felt that we needed to add some beef to it and add some some dynamics to it, because it really didn't change a lot during the recording process, which can't be said for a lot of some of the songs really did change around quite a lot, but it was from day one it was kind of obvious song, and I think it's great. It's one of the most instant ones, but if I'm honest, I think it'll be one of the ones that people will remember. I think it'll be
Do you think it'll be on the best of?
I think it might just make the best of the singles.
It's a song which fell out of the sky, and I regard songwriting as being like fishing, in that you can have all the right equipment and you can know what you're doing, but you really have no control on the size of fish which comes to you and when it bites and all that stuff. This song just arrived and I just reeled it in, and I can't take any credit for it because I couldn't have designed it. It just arrived, and there's no such thing as a Chris Martin song. Every song that is on the record has had the stamp of all of us on it, even if it's Will saying, "I'm not going to come in till 2 minutes 30," or Guy saying, "I'm not going to come in till 1 minute," whatever. Sometimes people not playing is a sign of them having done their.
I'm the best not playing drummer in the world.
Yeah, you're the
no
best.
one doesn't play like me.
You do the best gaps
Yeah.
I've ever heard.
White Shadows was one of the few songs that survived from the early recordings.
With Ken.
Yeah.
Ken Nelson produced that with us.
And we realised why that was because it was one of the few tracks that we really recorded very quickly, and a lot of us playing together. It was very live, and subsequent ones after that in that session were very kind of separate and disjointed and didn't really sound like a band. But that one really did, and for a long time it was completely on the back burner, and it wasn't even in consideration for the record. It was something that we'd done, and we had kind of cast all of that first session aside. But then Guy, we were talking about track listing one day, and Guy's always been a really kind of a champion of that song, and he said, I really think we should have another listen to White Shadows, and so we brought it back and listened to it and thought, wow,
what are we doing?
There are so many songs on this record. We just were talking about this the other day. It's like, thank God we put that on, because with the exception of maybe 3 songs, all of the songs have not been on at one stage, and and they're really all, of course, really important parts of the record.
It's interesting because we've done so many interviews recently. People saying, "Did you feel the pressure? Did you feel the pressure?" And we always say, "No, the main pressure came from inside." But I think, in some ways, it did come from outside, in that we were terrified of playing anybody anything. And so, like, we would keep doing these things, and we think it was great, and then we think, well, we can't play that to anybody, and then we would put it away somewhere. We're a very paranoid band, but secretly very confident underneath.
White Shadows is, I think, probably my favourite at the moment on the album, because I think it really doesn't sound like anything we've done before. I think the rhythm's very, it's got this kind of offbeat rhythm, which is just a really nice thing to play along to, and it's just a great, I think as a riff, Johnny's guitar riff is, it's just genius, and it just makes me sort of the hairs go up on the back of my neck every time I hear that.
At one point we discarded a lot of these songs and then brought them back. In fact, most of the best ones we've discarded, and this was one we discarded a very long time ago, and then kind of rediscovered once, because we thought we had it and we thought, right, this is the first single and it's the first track on the album, and suddenly that put all this pressure on it, and we thought, oh, no, actually it's crap. So we left it, and then we came back to it later and thought, without any of the pressure of it being a single or anything like that, and just thought, oh, I really enjoy this song.
You know, I think we might have been guilty in the past of everyone's trying to do too much at the same time, and I feel that when we're in a room playing now, we're kind of more spatially aware of what's going on around us, and that's why, you know, you get these sort of interesting sections happening, and the sort of dynamics going between one section into another is much more carefully crafted now, I think. And you know, we've been playing together for quite a few years now, and you're bound to improve, and you're bound to, you know, become better technically, and also better in terms of, you know, being aware of everyone else around you.
Fix You was us trying to do a Jimmy Cliff song, like a kind of Many Rivers to Cross sort of organ. It's one of the first songs we recorded we started it in Chicago, and it just managed to sort of stay the course. It's one of the few that remains, and so it's always been there. It's like the bedrock of the album. It's what all the other songs are kind of built around. It always had to be there, and it's probably my favourite song now.
You know, it's got a very powerful ending. You know, it sort of builds and builds. I just think it's got an amazing message in the song. I think it's one of the most direct songs on the album lyrically.
Well, the song Fix You is like What If and a song called Swallowed in the Sea. It's one of the songs that was always on the record, and it was an anchor around which everything else had to fit. Those three songs were never in question, because we felt like they were, well, first of all, they all arrived very similarly and very quickly, and they just, you know, we really loved them. I've been inspired by Where Is My Mind by the Pixies and Many Rivers to Cross by Jimmy Cliff at the same time. It's the first song we've ever had about loss or coping with loss. Quite a few people close to me have lost people very close to them, and you know, we've never really addressed it before, and I don't know, it was immediately one of our favourite songs. And you know, coping with loss and grief is like the thing that everybody has to do but nobody really talks about. It was very difficult to record in some senses because we went through many different versions of it, but eventually we went back to the version that John and I started in Chicago right at the beginning of the record, and we just kept that version. It was just on our minds a lot. It's interesting because, you know, we spent such a long time recording, we went through so many songs, and some songs that we always knew were going to be on as songs, we didn't necessarily know which version. And so we had probably 3 or 4 different versions of Fix You, and people liked different ones, but Will, you were the one that took us back to that first one, I think.
Well, it was just the ending. We never managed to get that quite right. It was just a mix of the voices at the end, because there's so many voices at the end, and there was something really kind of primal about the first version we'd done, and we had tried to kind of mellow it out a bit. We did a version where the ending didn't kick off as much, but it was just kind of more understated, but it just didn't have the same impact. And I mean, yeah, we did go through a lot of incarnations of that song, and I'm pleased that we stuck with the original one.
Talk is quite an interesting story behind Talk, really, because it's the first time we've sort of used a melody from someone else's music, and it takes the melody from Kraftwerk's Computer Love, which was just, you know, we just heard that riff one day, and it was one of those moments where you sort of think, damn, I wish I wrote that. But of course you can't, because it's already been written, and so the next thing you can do is nick it.
Yeah, and write them a nice letter asking if you could use it.
And
it was kind of it was like a pen pal letter Chris wrote. It was really, really nice.
It's odd because it was a song that was written around a riff rather than a riff written around a song. So it's quite unique in that respect, and I think that's why we struggled for quite a while to try and get the right version. Yeah, the right song. We had that one probably of all of the songs on the record had the most varied, most varied life. It had it had a verse that sounded like the Smiths crossed with Bowie. What's that? Ashes to Ashes.
Yeah, well, that was the song when we brought Ashes to Ashes into the studio.
And listened to it.
Well, you know, there came a point where we got to a version of Talk we really loved. So we said, right, well, we have to ask permission because everyone was telling us you only got to write to Kraftwerk and ask them. So we were in Townhouse with Danton and that's the studio, and I sat down to write this letter, and the only thing that I kept thinking of was like those pen pal letters that I used to get taught in German lessons. So it was a very strange thing because obviously Kraftwerk are quite mysterious people. I had no idea if they knew who Coldplay were, so I had to basically explain myself in the same way that I would have had to do when I was a 13-year-old schoolboy. So I was like, "Dear Ralph, my name is Chris Martin, I'm 28. I sing in a band called Coldplay, blah, 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 blah." And I drew a little picture. You know, it was great, and it was a pen pal letter. And then, luckily, there was a German guy in the studio who translated it into German, so I wrote it out again in German. "Lieber Ralph, ich bin ein Coldplayer." You know, and we wrote to him, and I thought, well, this is never going to happen. Everyone subsequently said it was extraordinary that they said yes, and they did say yes, and we're forever grateful because it's a good piece of work. We then freaked out because everybody said, well, that should be your first single, and then we scrapped it.
We got rid of it.
But then right at the end, this was like 3 weeks ago, we were in Los Angeles and this guy from the NME was there and he said, well, what happened to that song Talk? Why isn't it on the record? And I was like, well, you know. And Kev, our radio man, said, well, you know, well, where's that song Talk? So we were like, well, maybe we've made a mistake in dropping a song, and then again we went and listened to it, we were like, well, what are we doing? And we put it straight back on, and that was that.
X&Y is the most psychedelic we've ever been, and also the most Beatles we've ever been. And it's another really old song, I mean, from the last tour anyway. And yeah, I just always loved the chorus. It just took a long time to get the verse right, didn't it?
Yeah, it was one of these songs, I mean, we've been playing it, we played it at a radio session yesterday, and it just struck me how much I love it, and it was one of those songs that took such a long time to record, we just got really fed up with it, which always makes you think that it's not very good. But I think it came together when we just had one sort of final stab at it, and I think me and Will came up with a sort of much more interesting verse, bass and drum sort of sequence, and it just kind of helped tie it together. Because before it just seemed very flat to us, and I think, you know, that was one thing that we really had a problem with, was because we were working on these songs for such a long time, and we'd get fed up with them, and we would think that they were rubbish, but they weren't, you know.
Again, well, actually, it came around as the same kind of vintage as
That's the oldest song on the record.
Yeah, as What If and Swallow, in fact, earlier than them. And for a long time, it was very much a kind of. I just remember having an amazing opening line. The idea, the image of was it trying hard to speak and fighting with my weak hand, which I thought was an amazing. I just thought it was a great lyric. And so for a long time, it kind of played second fiddle to What If, because it was the same kind of song.
We were doing it very boring way.
Straight kind of ballad type thing. And so again, that was scrapped for a while, and then we readdressed it and thought, I think we've been listening to some Beatles songs where kind of later on in their career, where it was,
well, Come Together.
Yeah,
remember,
and I'm the Walrus and stuff like that.
We came in and asked you to play the beat from Come Together over the song.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. But then there was listening to that and Strawberry Fields as well, just songs that had odd structures and really, really, really different parts, and didn't necessarily, you know, if you'd have been listening to it early on, you would have thought that's never going to work. But then it was such a bold, you know, it was really bold structures and arrangements that they really seemed to work. So we thought we ended up, that actually is kind of a similar method to the way they used to do it, in that we had like 4 different versions and we just literally snipped them and joined them together. There was no.
It's our attempt at a Beatles song in every element, you know, even down to the way that we knew that they used to snip bits of songs together and edit bits of tape together. Like if you listen to Strawberry Fields, there's a bit where you can hear that John Lennon's voice sounds weird, and it's because they sped the tape down. They slowed the tape down. So we just thought, well, let's have as much fun with this song as possible and try and do a Beatles song. We've been playing it live in the last week, and it's turned into. I don't want to be arrogant, but I really like it.
Speed of Sound, we felt it was a good first single because it's kind of a bridge song between the last record and the new record, and also it kind of shows that we're still about melodic songs, and but also shows sort of progression in sound as well, but hopefully not too much that will alienate people. It's so hard picking a first single because it's like you're trying to represent the whole album in one song, which is impossible to do.
All four of us wanted a different first single at any one time, and we'd all change our minds every week. And so it took months, of tearing our hair out. It was written in Chris's house, actually, about the summer of 2004, and we were listening to Kate Bush, and I was trying to do some Nick McCabe guitar lines. So they're the two people Chris and I were taking off.
Well, we listened to Running Up That Hill, Kate Bush, and that was kind of the backbone idea, I think, for that song.
Yeah, it's trying to make sense of the sort of things that you take for granted, the really incredible things or the terrible things that you just accept happen, but then you don't really understand why.
First of all, we were trying to write a Kate Bush song, and second of all, the lyrics were trying to express the feeling of awe, which so many things that I used to take for granted suddenly started giving me. Maybe because of having a baby, maybe because of suddenly appreciating everything we've been given. But it was about recognising miracles and incredible things that are around you all the time, and not necessarily having to explain them or work them out, because sometimes we have a tendency to overanalyze everything and worry about everything too much, and it's really a song about just letting yourself enjoy or be terrified by miracles and tragedies and not necessarily have to explain them.
For me, that Speed of Sound, I'll put my hand up and say I didn't really like it for a long time, and I don't know why, if something didn't feel right. But then we had gone to New York to mix it with Michael Brown. It was the first song that he mixed, and I arrived on the second day. Johnny and Guy had been there and they had mixed it with him, and then I went in the next morning and listened to it, and it was just like a completely different song. I don't know how, it's a testament to his amazing mixing ability, but also a testament to the fact that there's still so much you can do with the song, even though we've as far as we're concerned, it's finished. Musically, it was finished, and we gave it to someone else, and he added that extra, whatever it is, 10-15% on top of it, which makes it a completely different song. So
What was the last song you didn't like?
Clocks. Didn't like that one. See, that's why it's not always a good idea to for Chris.
There's degrees. But I know the degrees to which you're not sure about something.
But also, I'm very good at holding my tongue, and sometimes it's something so bad that I have to say no, and then other times, like the Clocks one, when I first heard it, it's like it's all right, but then obviously when it got to when we finished it, I was like, this is brilliant. So I have to be careful not to say my piece too early.
Well, a message to me is a very, very important part of the album. Every part obviously is important, but when we were supposed to have finished the album in time for Christmas and in time for EMI shareholders and people like that, we went away at Christmas time thinking, oh well, let's just have a listen to it and see what we think. And it just wasn't good enough. The mixes were terrible, and some of the songs we sort of changed at the last minute, and we'd scrapped all kinds of, it was a mess. And I was in Los Angeles, we had 10 days off, and it just struck me like, we've got to just we're not going to meet this deadline, it's stupid. We have to just finish it. It became very clear because we'd been in the studio for so many hours, for so many months, like totally intensely, that suddenly, like after 2 days of being away from it, it all just became very clear. And actually, Danny McNamara again and my brother-in-law, Jake, both listened to what we had, and they were both like, you should write one more song. And I was like, you what? I've written a million songs, blah, 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 blah. And they said, well, we're just saying. But I knew they were right, and we had one more idea for a song left, which was to try and adapt this hymn that I used to sing at my school called My Song Is Love Unknown. So we came back to London to try and, we were just coming back to finish the other songs anyway, and then we knew that we were going to go to America and mix with Michael Brower. And I just had this bug in my head, like, you've got to finish that song. But everyone else was like, we haven't got time to finish this song, blah, blah, blah. And then one night, in the middle of the night, I just sat up in bed, totally wired, and something in my head was just telling me, go downstairs. So I said, I don't want to go downstairs, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It said, no, go downstairs. It was like, it was an argument with myself. In my head, I said, well, this bed's comfortable. They said, yeah, but just go down, see what happens. So I went downstairs, totally nude, and I sat down with the same guitar that had just a few months earlier, a month earlier, given us the end of Square One, and this song just arrived in like 4 minutes, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. And other people might not think this song's special at all, but to me, it's just such a special song, and I'm incredibly proud of it, and it then meant that the record could be finished.
It's the last song, The Message is the last song to be written for the album, and when it was written, and we recorded it in about a day and a half or something, right at the end, rushing, and when we'd done it, we knew we had the right mixture of songs. I think we felt we needed another one, and that one just came along. I really like it because it adds a whole, because a lot of the songs are very dense, and densely, there's a lot of stuff going on, and then this is a nice space to this song.
I like A Message because it's just very, it's just, the sentiment of the lyrics again are just very, very direct. It's not, it's not one of the songs which is kind of more abstract lyrically, and it's just really powerful. I guess it's just about sort of not being as strong as as you are on your own, and it's important to have someone or something and to kind of share your time with.
Low was a real turning point on the album because it was the first song we started rehearsals halfway through. We went back into the rehearsal room, and we got really excited again about being a band, and became much better friends, and excited about spending time on the recording, and just reignited our passion for what we were doing, because suddenly I felt like I'd had an idea which I didn't really feel like I'd had for a year. It basically just brought us back together as a proper band again.
We started when we went into the rehearsal room, with the idea that we hadn't been a band. It was just really exciting to have this new kind of mindset and this new song which was different, and we all loved it, and it was just felt like the beginning. And when we went in and recorded with Danton, it really it said to us, right, you can do this, you've got it right now, you've decided the right way to go about things, and this is just going to be the first song that you do in this way, and you're going to carry on and do everything like this.
We kind of drifted apart a bit, I think, with all the stuff that goes on around you, and the bigger you get, you just stop relying on each other and start relying on other things, And when we sort of realised we had to get rid of everything else around us and just go back into a room with the four of us and basically show off to each other, and that, you know, that was how we started, and that's why we did it in the first place. And it took a long time to realise what was missing.
Well, I think what we were really guilty of, and you know, for the first part of this record, was kind of treating the studio as a bit of a day job, and sort of going from 9 till 5 and then going out for a nice meal in the evening. And kind of, you know, when you left the studio, you switch off and you go, all right, it's my time now. But to be honest, if you want to make a record, a good record, you can't. It's got to be a 24-hour sort of love affair. You know, you've got to. So when we started working again in the studio, it was all hours. You know, sometimes, you know, not coming out till sort of 3, 4 in the morning, and just you can't switch off. It's got to be that sort of clear focus that you have to get through it.
I think the riff from Low had been around for a while, hadn't it?
Yeah, we wrote the first part of it in Zurich, in a velodrome. Remember that place with like a cycle?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a big arena with a cycling track.
I do remember that. And for a long time it was called Zurich, that
It
song.
was called Zurich.
But when we had our revelation that our songs, that the recording we had done up to that point wasn't really very good, and we knew what we had to do. We knew we had to get rid of everything, you know, excommunicate ourselves basically.
Late August.
Yeah. And put ourselves in a little room and just play all the songs together. And we had like 3 songs, and this was the main one that we went in deliberately to try and rehearse and and we played it and played it and played it for a week or so. And then we were just really excited about it because we were in a tiny little room, and it really felt like the way it felt when we were first as a band, you know, first going to these scabby little rehearsal rooms and
so we said, we were suddenly getting this incredible feeling again. We were like, well, why are we getting this incredible feeling? And Guy or Will said, well, it's because we're playing together in a room. And there's no technology in here, there's no assistants or producers or managers or groupies or anything like that. And it was just feeling amazing. So then we said, right, well, we've got to re-record all those other songs then. And so Low was a big turning point. And it was the first song where I felt like Johnny was pushing himself to do new things, and Will was pushing himself to do new things, and we were starting to referencing things all the time, and it's a really good sign. This song suddenly made us realise, wow, you know, the best feeling is when the 4 of us are just trying to push each other and inspire each other, and that's what we've got to get back to, and that's what we subsequently did. The hardest part is the most pop and the most unforward-thinking song we've ever done, but it's really good. And so we put it on our, I'm sure we'll take a lot of flack for that song. I'm sure we'll take a lot of flack for all the songs. I'm sure we'll take a lot of flack for everything, but particularly for that song. But sometimes it's good to not try and push in any direction. Sometimes it's good to just sort of strum.
The hardest part was a song which just made it on the album again, because although we really love it as a song, we felt that it didn't, for some reason, quite fit with the rest of the songs, just from a sort of stylistic point of view, I guess. I think we were worried that it might have felt a bit too sort of poppy or a bit too sort of up sounding, but I think, you know, thankfully we just decided that, you know, it was a great song and we shouldn't worry about anything other than it being a great song, and so it's made it.
It was really helped by the mix that Michael Brower did of it in New York, and he ended up mixing the whole album, and he really we said to him, we don't want it to sound too pop. It sounds a bit nice, and so he really helped us like it again, I think. Swallowed in the Sea is a song we've had for a long time as well. It's always been there. It was always Will's favourite, I think, and he would just say, well, we're going to do a great album, we've got this, and so just, you know, you have to write everything else. It's just a kind of standard for everything else to be, you know, at least as good as, and for a long time it wasn't, but I've always really liked this song. It's a real sort of folk song, kind of comes from listening to the Pogues and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's just the melodies and the chords are really, you know, so simple, and sometimes it's the songs like that which are that sort of ring around your ears for ages. And I think people are going to pick up on Swallowed in the Sea quite quickly. As to what we do with it, sort of single wires or stuff like that, we haven't decided.
Swallowed in the Sea is the third Big Anchor song, and it came very, very fast. It was another 4-minute songwriting job. I think we recorded it twice. The first time was it was good, but it wasn't brilliant. We even mixed the first version, but it just didn't have anything original about it. And it was supposed to be an attempt to write Fairy Tale of New York, and it, of course, didn't reach those heights, but it did come out with a melody that you can kind of whistle without any instruments, and you know what song it is, which we'd never really done before. And Will championed, no pun intended, that song from the very beginning.
It's my favourite, yeah, from the moment Chris played it to me, definitely. And still is.
Is it still your favourite?
In terms of kind of pure melody, definitely.
Was I can write a song? I can't, I'm so bad at analysing. It's like trying to analyse your own nose, analysing your own songs. So it looks sort of thin to me. I can't really see it properly.
Twisted Logic was a song that came out quite a while ago, when we were in the
it came out in the same period. It came out around summertime last year with Speed of Sound and Talk.
Yeah.
Until Kingdom Come.
It was...
we like it because it's heavy and it's angry and it's dark and it doesn't necessarily have a melody, but we don't really care. And it's kind of inspired by Muse and Barber. Do you know who Barber is? Like the guy that wrote Adagio. Yeah, it's obviously not as good as that, but it's a good effort. I think that's good, that song.
Yeah, it's great. Definitely. It's going to be fun to play.
The core group that is the four of us and Phil, our silent fifth member who lives in Australia, which is 5 of the 7 people that are allowed to decide what goes on the album, we were all very strongly for it. And Phil called me from Australia and said, whatever anyone tells you, don't drop Twisted Logic off the record. And I was like, I totally agree. And he said, people will say it hasn't got a melody and it hasn't got this, but, lyrically we're very proud of it. We feel very, very strongly about fair trade, and we're always talking about fair trade, and we're always trying to get that message across. And we feel strongly about a lot of things that you could deem political, but we've always said that songs must arrive naturally and you can't contrive the lyrics. And that's why our songs tend to be mostly about feelings rather than about, John was a scientist, things like that. Although that is someone's song.
Yeah.
It's not character songs. We can't do Bob Dylan character songs. And I'm very proud of Twisted Logic because it's sort of saying what we think about fair trade and about certain leaders and stuff, but it's actually just saying about the feeling that gives you. See what I mean? And it also contains the message of X&Y because it's about feeling really pessimistic about the world, but also being optimistic because you know that things can always change, and the people that are doing bad things can always be replaced with people that do good things.
Twisted Logic's the most angry song we've ever done, and also has the most Led Zeppelin-like drums we've ever had, and probably the most distorted guitars we've ever had. So it's for us, we really like it. I mean, although we had discarded it for a long time, and completely forgotten about it for probably 6 months, and then went back to it and just added a couple of things, and we found we liked it again. And as soon as we'd done the ending on it, we knew it had to end the album. Once, and then we had the start and the finish. All we had to do was fill in the middle.
Well, so Kingdom Come was a song that Chris wrote for Johnny Cash, and it was he was looking for songs for his 5th album in that series, the American recordings that he does with Rick Rubin, and Chris wrote a song, sent it to Rick Rubin, and he really liked it, and I think got as far as recording it with Rick, and then they were going to play it to John. I don't know whether he heard it or not, but they were going to play it to him, and he was going to sing on it, but unfortunately he passed away before he could. So
we kept it.
Yeah, we kept it. Maybe it was some kind of tribute thing, but also because it was. I thought it was one of the things. The only song on the record where it's all basically one take, 4 of us live, and guys playing.
It is one take, not it's totally one take.
Guy playing the bass on the piano, Chris and Johnny playing guitars, and I was playing a little pump organ, and it was just, it was I think probably the second take we did out of 3 or 4, and it was there and finished.
We did it with Ken in New York,
yeah.
And I remember Ken saying to me at the end of that day, he said, "I love working like that," and so that was when the seed was planted in my head of maybe we're not playing together enough, and. It's one of those things that you take it home. And funny enough, the only thing before that I'd been taking home and listening to and couldn't stop listening to was White Shadows. And looking back, those were the first 2 actual recordings we kept.
Yeah.
You know, totally. I just kept listening to Till Kingdom Come over and over again. And it's basically the hidden track on the album. It's not listed, partly because it's written for somebody else, but partly because it's a nice sentiment to close on, and it really will make my dad happy because he loves country, and we always try and include some country on the records.